So in the earlier video you had learnt about POP, that is procedural oriented programming, as well as object oriented programming, OOP. Procedural oriented programming had certain disadvantages, so the users stopped using procedural oriented programming, whereas in object oriented programming there are certain advantages of using this language. That is, here the data values are secured, mishandling of data is protected, error detection and corrections become easier in coding complex programs. Whereas in your procedural oriented programming, the disadvantages was the data values was flowing freely from one functions to another, the data was not protected, error detection and correction made difficult for the users while debugging the program, and it was giving you a lengthier program as it consisted lots of functions into it. Okay, the examples of POP I have told you all earlier that it was COBOL, then Fortran, Pascal, etc. Whereas the examples of OOP is Java, C++, Python. Okay, so I expect that you have understood the previous video. Now I'll just continue with the remaining part of unit 1, that is related to the topic now of principles of OOP. The first principle says you as data abstraction, the second principle says you of encapsulation, the third principle is inheritance, and the last one is polymorphism. Okay, so let us start with data abstraction. The act of representing the essential features without knowing the background detail is known as data abstraction. Okay, so you might have understood this definition. That means you are representing the essential feature, but you are not aware of the background detail on what you are working with. Now for example, take an example of driving a car, operating a mobile or a camera. A person feels like he wants to drive a car, but he is unaware of this skill. He doesn't know to drive a car, but still he feels that he wants to just check off with the accelerator and all. Okay, operating with a mobile phone or a camera also the same way. A newer mobile phone which comes into the market, but still the users feel that buyers feel that they want to buy a mobile, but they don't know the features, how does that mobile work on with. As well as the camera also the same way, the person doesn't know to operate the digital camera, but still he goes on pressing the buttons to know. Okay, then the next comes with that of encapsulation. Encapsulation says that wrapping up of data and functions into the single unit. Okay, wrapping the data and functions into the single unit. Now take an example over here. You are having object 1 as well as object 2. Okay, in object 1 you are having data as well as function, in object 2 also you are having data as well as function. But what happens is that from object 1 to object 2 you cannot pass the data directly. Okay, from object 1 to object 2 you cannot pass your data directly, whereas if you feel that you want to pass the data from one object to another object, that can be done using functions. That means what happens is the data and function is together wrapped out. Okay, that is called as encapsulation. Next comes with that of inheritance. Inheritance says you that one class is acquiring some features from another class. Okay, one class is acquiring some features of another class. It promotes reusability. Now for example, I have taken one class over here as arrays. What is arrays? Arrays is a type of data type. Which data type? Whether it is a primitive data type or a non-primitive data type, it is a non-primitive data type. Okay, arrays is considered as a base class, and the two parts of arrays is single dimensional array as well as double dimensional array, and this single dimensional array and double dimensional array is called as the derived class of your base class. Is that clear to all? Okay, it is called as a derived class of this base class. Fine. Now you can take one more example saying as your own class standards. Okay, you are from standard 10th. Okay, your standard 10th becomes as the base class, whereas standard 10th A and standard 10th B is the derived class from the base class. That means you are acquiring, you both classes are acquiring the same features, but you are situated or located or seated in another class. So what are the same features that you are acquiring? You are having, you both classes are having same uniforms, your same books, your same textbooks, your same teachers, common teachers, all this is called as inheritance. Okay, acquiring some features from another class. Is that clear of inheritance? Then comes the advantages of using inheritance in your programming. Advantages of using inheritance in your programming. Now, the first point says you that it allows less time in writing a program. Obviously, as you are using inheritance in your programming, henceforth you will be learning in detail in the coming chapters about inheritance later on. So, allows less time in writing a program, takes less memory space for storage, enables program execution faster. So, these are the advantages of using inheritance principle. The last one is your polymorphism. So, polymorphism says that you are using a single function to carry multiple work. You are using some single functions to carry multiple tasks is called as polymorphism. The example for polymorphism, take an example, a term called as CELL cell. Okay, this CELL cell term is used either in physics but has different meaning, is also used in biology, your subject, but also has a different meaning for this also, in this also, or else a small room. A small room is called as it may be either your administrative cell or else any of your office cell, or a computer room is also called as a cell, computer cell. Okay. So, polymorphism means single function to carry multiple tasks. Is that clear to all? So, I will just repeat, I will just revise with the topics which I have done in your previous video, as well as I will cover up within this video the first unit of your revision of your 9th standard syllabus. In the next video, we will start with the second unit. I will complete off, and if I can, I will start with your third unit. Okay. I will just revise, I will just turn over my page. This was in your previous video that you had learnt with that is introduction of your computer languages. I have told you about two types of computer languages, that is low level and high level. High level again further classified into procedure oriented and object oriented. I have told you about procedure oriented, that the stress is given on functions rather than data values. Okay. And procedure oriented programming use variables, functions, statements and conditional operators. POP works basically on the following principles, that is, problems are divided into smaller programs called as functions. Data move freely from one function to another function. This is the tree structure of explaining how the data value freely flow from one function to the second function and to the third function. I have told you about this. Then later on, it had certain disadvantages of using your POP. That is, there is no restriction of data value. Then problems was faced by the programmer while debugging. Then the program was very lengthier as you were using POP in your programming structure. Then we even had gone through with the examples of POP, that is basic, COBOL, Fortran or etc. Then we had even learned with that of object oriented programming. Here the stress was given more on the data values rather than the functions. Data values cannot flow freely over here within a particular programming area. Okay, this was the block diagram which I have explained about this, that as you are using OOP, that means you are splitting your program into number of segments called as objects, into a number of segments called as objects. Okay, so the data values can flow from one object to another, but one data value of another object cannot go for the function. Okay, this was told in this part. Then you had certain advantages of OOP. Just now I told you, data values are secured over here, then data is also protected over here, debugging can be easily done, the correction can be easily done by the programmer, then the coding is short over here, not as lengthy. And these were the principles of OOP that I explained just now for you all. Okay, I will stop over here. Thank you.